Yeah, so you do. So you're saying, like, I still feel my anxiety, but I got a good relationship with it, so I can challenge myself and just kind of...
Yeah, I can catch it before it ends up letting me change my behavior.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about that. So let's talk about, like I was telling somebody today or yesterday, I was like, okay, this is done three ways, man. There's a biology, there's like a CBT component, and then there's an exposure component. Now, when you're coming and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this live in Canada, this guy's in Canada, this crazy dude, he's trying to talk to me, and it's just like, what do you do to get yourself to that position where you're like, you don't back out, where you don't, where anxiety doesn't take over?
Well, basically, it's more so that I guess I'm aware that I'm feeling like, let's say, if my heart started to race a little bit, I'd be like, oh, okay, my heart's racing. Like, and I'm just aware of that sensation. So I'm just like, oh, my heart's racing. There's no value attached to that being good or bad. It just is. It's my heart's racing a little bit. That doesn't mean I'm in danger. That doesn't mean anything's actually wrong. It's just alerting me to like, hey, you're doing this thing that you haven't done before. Soon, that's cool. Yeah. Like, what are you going to do about it? I get to then respond to that sensation. And so I think that was what was really good is I try as much as possible between clients as well, although I run over a lot, but between clients to try and take like moments of reset and, take a deep breath, do mindfulness, meditation sort of based stuff to allow myself to actually, I guess, practice what I preach, but to sort of allow the sensation not to mean anything more than, hey, this is just your fight or flight response, and I'm just letting you know that you're on alert right now. So
absolutely. So it's just like, okay, I need to be mindful of what's going on. What about when you're just like, oh shit, I'm losing the battle, like I'm starting to lose it, like where I don't feel like I can. What do you do there?
Okay, so I guess it would, I think the belief that I can't do anything about it right now is actually the problem a lot of the time. So it's sort of immediately you've gone into placing a value on your ability to cope in a moment. And instead of being like, oh, wait, even just like sitting here and being alive is actually coping with life, immediately you've gone, this next moment I can't cope with. And so whatever you write for yourself, whatever that narrative is that you're kind of in, you will then start to behave in ways that I guess reinforce it. So I feel like the narrative of I can't cope with this, or I'm not going to be able to manage myself during this talk is probably the thing that would actually be getting in the way, and that will exacerbate then physical sensations. So
it's that belief system, right? Oh, so like Alexis, like, I can't do this. Like, she kind of has this concept that she can't do. But is there, like, I run into a lot of people that are just like, I don't know. I just can't. I just wake up in the morning, I got anxiety from day one. It's this, and it's just like more of a disorder type of thing. And is that just meds all day, or is that, like, I know that's not like, like I know medication helps to do that sometimes, but is that their reality? Or is there, like, I know they can help with CBT, I know they can help with exercise and diet and stuff, but for that person, I was just like, yesterday, I think it was like, she was like, oh, I wake up in the morning, I have it, I've always had it, nothing's ever really made it. I'm like, okay, what if we just accept that? Is that kind of the angle where you're kind of like, yeah, let's just accept that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's very much that you will struggle with anxiety all the time. Like, people will always struggle with anxiety, but you will only suffer with anxiety if you choose to resist the anxiety. So if you decide, I don't ever want to be somebody who has an anxious thought or an anxious feeling, you will absolutely have continuous and persistent anxious thoughts and feelings. So it's that trying to develop a positive relationship with, I can exist and have these thoughts, change my relationship to the thoughts and to the sensations, behave differently in response to them, but also allow myself a lot of self-compassion with how difficult that is to do on a disordered level. When it is a significant, again, panic disorder, OCD, social anxiety, it takes a lot of having to do something before you feel comfortable doing it in order to feel comfortable. So
that's a tricky balance.
Exactly.
Right? How do you teach the balance? Like, how do you teach a person to find that?
So I'm maybe this is where I'm a little bit tougher, but I really go in the direction of, it should be difficult. Like, why shouldn't it be difficult to manage our mental health at all? Like, this is, look how much effort people put into building like physical muscle and how much that takes. That mental muscle should be just as much effort. It should require us to be like, I'm as committed to this as anything else. So if it's heavy today, I'm going to just pick it up and lift. Like, that's, and I'm going to trust that right now I'm going to feel really uncomfortable, but that's that's not for, I'm not doing this for the current me. I'm doing this for the future me. I'm doing that for that future self who, 5 years from now is going to really be happy that I went on stage and did whatever, or I, phoned that friend that I was anxious about talking to. Or even more, again, from a disordered level, like, is really going to be happy that I didn't do that compulsion, that I didn't seek reassurance. Things like that.
Nice. So that discipline is just like drive it. Just drive it.
Yeah. I often say to people, like, really a good way of talking about it is, and again, I know it's hard because it's, common knowledge is not necessarily common practice, right? So, like, that's just not what we do. We're like, hey, you ask any psychologist or therapist what they'd like people to do more of, it's breathe, and people don't do that very well. So I really like the idea of separating motivation from action. So I don't have to feel like doing this thing to do it. My feelings don't have to match the behavior that I'm choosing for myself.
How do you do that? How would I separate my motivation? Because it's just like, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like I want to do it. Now, I know when I do it in the gym, and I know we talked, we're both MMA fans, we love this stuff, which is awesome. So, like, and I often give a story about where I'm like, I didn't want to go to the gym one Monday, but it was my discipline that got me there, not my motivation. My motivation was gone, but my discipline said, no, we're going to do it. Exactly. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of, but it's also, I think, developing that relationship of, I guess, physically using the environment to help you. Like, if you're laying in bed and you're like, I just cannot get out of bed today. It's actioning, like moving your legs to the floor and standing up. It's like that mindful, what action can I take even though it feels like I don't want to do it? What can I do? I even say to people, if it's like physiologically your body is not sitting in the right place for you, just feel like I'm in my head, I can't ground. That's go and like splash water on your face, cold water, actively do something to reset yourself. Let yourself kind of feel whatever you're feeling and think whatever you're thinking in that moment, but allow for it to be then a reset, that you can move from that moment to the next moment. So it's very kind of mindfulness based as well.
It's mindfulness. Yeah. Now, that's fair. What are you saying? Are you saying like, hey, if I keep pushing through, if you're saying, Ken, just keep going, just keep pushing, go in the bathroom, splash in the water, just keep doing it, doesn't matter. And it's just like, what's the goal? The goal is kind of like, eventually this is going to get easier? Is that what you mean?
I'm really big on the process, not the outcome stuff. So I really love the idea of like focusing on the moment and not for the bigger picture. But on that bigger picture level, that future self, you are going, I want to be somebody who functions better with anxiety. So that is definitely in there, is that, can I have a better relationship with anxiety? Can my body sensations not be as intense? But I guess the idea is that you're also trying not to fear. So you're trying not to be afraid of or aim to sort of go, I need to eventually get to a place where I don't feel anxious anymore, because that's not going to be realistic and will set you backwards. It's the wrong motivation for the behavior. I often say to people, like, if I was going to the gym to try and just lose weight and, make sure everybody approved of me physically, that would be a terrible reason to go to the gym. Like, you should be at the gym for strength, for, like building confidence, trying different things. There's a lot of, and just general health. So the motivator for going to the gym would be trying to move it to I guess, a better motivation to doing things. So it's definitely still being able to kind of go, I hope to feel better in the future. And we know from habituation you generally do, but it's also going, I can't just hinge my success in this moment to the outcome, because in reality, putting effort into doing this was a huge, I should be proud of myself for that. Like, that's really cool.
You can reward yourself for the battle.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And so, Alexis is asking a question. She's like, how do we form a better relationship with anxiety?
So, I think a really big part of it is actually trying to allow yourself to see it as an emotion that's as relevant as every other emotion, that it's something that is is actually there to protect us, but can be overactive at certain times. So it is actually there to be like, hey, like, what should we do about this situation? And then you can respond to sort of whatever's going on in that moment. I think a lot of the time we're also placing a value on something being anxiety. So, you know, a thought pops into our mind and we go, oh my God, that makes me anxious. That's an anxious thought. Instead of that's a thought, you know, or that's bad or that's good. So there's a lot of kind of judgment.
So mindful.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
That's my 101, right? It's just like, no, just let that cloud go by. That's just a thought. I don't need to attach anything to that thought.
Yes, yeah.
That's so hard because your body's in on the anxiety, right? Not just your mind, your body's in on it too. Your body's like, yeah, well, that's great, that thought there, but what do I do about that? What do I do about this thing? Like, my body feels like it's going off.
Yeah, I think it's about being, like, I know it's really weird, but I'm like, I try to get people to be really excited about how cool it is that they get to do this process of challenging themselves to be physiologically more resilient, like to let themselves kind of put themselves in uncomfortable situations enough to build up that armor, you know, and from there be able to, I guess, again, expand that window of tolerance. All of a sudden they've got like this much higher tolerance level that they never thought they'd be, you know, capable of having, but they didn't get there without actually building that. So I guess it's in the kind of, this is so exciting that we get to build this. Why do I have to look at it like it's a terrible thing that I have to manage this instead of I'm human, like I'm going to have these emotions. This is really good. I just have to make sure that I'm controlling the emotions, not the other way around. And not controlling the emotions. That would be a good way of saying it. But more so that I'm controlling the response to the emotions that are coming up.
Right? Yeah, okay. So, but this is where you're going to, this is where I find is like, okay, so now what about the guy that's got panic disorder? Because having like their whole thing is about like getting anxiety. Like that's what's actually scaring the crap out of them,
exactly.
Right?
So that's, I mean, it's so cliche, but it's that thing of like, because you don't want to have a panic attack, you are going to have continuous panic attacks. Like
100%, right? That's the problem, yeah.
And it's not faking it. It's not like, I'd love a panic attack. Like it's not pretending like you're all of a sudden happy to have panic attacks, but it's feeling that feeling and then being willing to do the behavior anyway of sitting and inducing panic, you know, like allowing yourself to actually, I guess that's also within therapy, I guess inducing panic more so, but allowing yourself outside of let's say just in everyday life, go into moments that make you feel like you're going to have a panic attack and stay in that situation as long as possible and not leave it when that fight or flight response kicks up.
You're talking about exposure.
Yes, it's always exposure.
So I know that I know your tough stuff, right? You're talking about the MMA thing. I read your bio thing, like on your, and I was like, oh, look at this. Like she's talking about like maladaptive safety behavior. She's talking about discipline. She's talking about like avoidance and all of that. So tell us about that because that's kind of your slant.
I do.
Right?
I love it.
It's like no. Let's go for it.
I mean, it's funny. I always thought I would be more of like a cognitive therapist, but I'm so behavioral and I never realized that would happen to me. I loved all the cognitive stuff and I was all like, okay, let's just work on the thoughts. What can we do about that? And then all of a sudden I was like, there's no way I can think my way out of worrying about what people think about me. There was no amount of challenging I could do. I literally had to go into the situation, experience that uncomfortability of, okay, I don't know, there's an uncertainty that I need to embrace here. But if that person doesn't, well, first of all, the likelihood of somebody not liking you just from you standing there in front of them is probably not the case, not as likely. But even if the worst thing did happen and all the people in the room didn't like me, I would cope. That's what would be so bad about that. Physiologically, I could sit in that moment. And so it was something where I was like, even just personally, I just was not able to move, I think with a lot of even perfectionistic tendencies, a lot of other stuff without actually that actual challenging, actually going and sort of facing the fears. And I think it can be something really rewarding, like the amount of effort and like the beauty of the kind of rapport that it takes to do that with somebody. You see people go, there's no way I'm doing this. And then weeks later, we're sitting there like mid, panic attack. We're dealing with it. We're, in the middle of resisting a compulsion and then trying to actively do something uncomfortable, touch a bunch of stuff, do whatever it is, think of the really disturbing thought, humor it. And it's really something that you watch the person go, this is like, how am I feeling okay about this even though I'm so uncomfortable? And like, because that's you, like, you're building so much confidence right now by just doing this as well. Like, the amount of effort you're putting into this, like, it deserves to be praised. Like, it deserves to kind of be looked at as...
Where you're recalibrating the way you think about it, because you've exposed them there, see?
Yeah, I can do hard things. I always say, like, there's a good one, I can do hard things.
Oh, I love that.
And that's not mine. That's definitely, I'll have to think of who the expert is in panic, but he uses that.
Oh, it's yours. But it's going to be yours tomorrow. Don't even worry. When I post this tomorrow, it's going to be yours. Okay, Kelsey says, I tend to avoid situations and things that I think will make me anxious or push me out of the comfort zone. Even if it's the smallest amount outside of that, I'll put it off or avoid it. So Kelsey, I think, is like, hey, how do I get there? Like, so it's like, it's one thing to sit there in Tonia's office, and Tonia's like, go, you got it, go, let's go. And there's one thing when I'm at home, and I'm like, whoa, or like I'm at that party, or I'm at that thing, and like, how do you not avoid it? How do you get there in the place where you can?
Well, I think a large part of it is also, gradual, is recognizing what's the realistic possible step that you could take. So it's not going for the big thing. It's the whole, if you're afraid of a dog, you're not going to walk in a room of dogs. It's starting with that, what's that one step closer to that getting outside of that comfort zone. So in that moment, even if it's just, I'm staying in this moment for 20 seconds longer than what I was willing to, that's you getting out of your comfort zone. It does, it does not have to be that it's some, like false ideal. It's actually like your current reality is that this is
it's like a SMART goal. Like a SMART goal has to be achievable or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, if this scares you, then we're just going to be like, okay, just touch the doorknob. Okay, just open the door. Okay, just like next week, just do this. What about people that you find that people are like, man, it just takes so much energy.
Yeah.
It just takes so much energy to wake up every day and fight this fight. Like, I get so many people come to me and they want this quick fix. Like, Ken, teach me about anxiety. I'm like, okay. Then we break it all down, and then they go on meds because they're just like, I just don't have the energy to do that. So how does that? How would you? That?
I think a big part of it is letting them know my thoughts on sort of not going straight for the medication. And I don't mean like antidepressants. I specifically mean more so like Valium, the stuff that's going to stop. That's more so the side that I'm thinking.
Ativan,
all the lovely stuff that, sounds good, but is our kryptonite for anxiety, because we don't get to then actually target, like test ourselves. So I think I try and look at it as like taking more of a self-compassion route and look at, okay, maybe the first thing that you need to actually be okay with is thinking about what the outcome will be of some of these things if we're able to do them. If we're able to go, okay, we want to be able to do this. So even if we're just talking about that thing, that's exposure at times for people. I've had people go into like panic attacks just from saying certain words. It is something that's obviously so possible. So I think it's allowing yourself to kind of build that self-compassion instead of a lot of self-criticism that happens when you can't take those steps, right? That's what happens with procrastination. That's what happens, with the cycle of getting stuck, because there's just this like shame, guilt, anger itself, all these emotions, because you're a human being that doesn't want to do something tough. It's like, that's completely reasonable. But there's a bigger picture that we can aim towards. So let's build more of a sense of, I deserve to feel better. So I want to do better for myself.
Yeah, okay, sure. And that's good. And that's encouraging them to keep going. Yeah. You said something about shame and guilt, which is interesting, because a lot of anxiety goes back to how I feel about myself. And then kind of, you said also, I know you deal with perfectionism. Yep. It's like, how do I see myself, my love, my self-love, my self-acceptance? It's a lot of it goes there, right? Especially social anxiety, the fear of being judged negatively. Like, there's something about me that must be negative.
Yeah.
You do a lot of social anxiety. I mean, obviously you suffer from that as well.
Yeah, it's really funny because I feel like no one ever believes it anyway. They're like, oh, she's making some story up to be more relatable to me. And it's just funny. They're just like, there's no way this girl was ever anxious, like socially anxious. But I think what's really interesting is it's actually quite hard to treat social anxiety in a clinical setting. Like it can be really difficult at times to get people to buy into the idea that it's okay if people don't like them. and that it's okay to feel like, especially if there's that perfectionism that's behind it, which is like, but people have to like me, like I'm a valuable person if people like me, and there's a lot of that stuff can be quite difficult. So I think if you're adding perfectionism in, it gets much harder. But if it is sort of, and I think like the stats at one point were like, I think it was like up to 30 to 50% of people who are socially anxious have perfectionistic tendencies, which I mean is not surprising necessarily, but I think that.
Well, you can't judge me if I'm perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like, as long as these people are going to feed back to me how I could be perfect, I will continue to aim for that, and my life will somehow be more valuable instead of I'm going to be miserable doing this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it sounds like you do a lot of that switching about like the switching from like the miserable to the valuable. It sounds like that's a big component of.
Yeah, definitely. I love sort of saying, I love the whole future self sort of concept. So I use that a lot in, even use the whole, I guess, if you, just today, like if you were somebody who really loved themselves, had compassion for themselves, wanted the best for themselves, what would you do in that moment? And a lot of the time it's not whatever we've done. So it's, sometimes I really just like the person to be able to, I guess decide in that moment who they choose to be instead of what their emotions are telling them they should be.
Okay, and then so they're just going to choose to be a person that deserves to take this walk, or just like, it's not like, you're not choosing like, I choose to be this character, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, I choose to just be this person that just makes this next
Yeah.
Like, it's more of a present thing than it is like a universal concept.
Yeah, really present. Yeah. Like in this moment, I would choose to be somebody who, literally in that moment, like decided to do my meditation instead of just flick on the TV and watch something. Like it just in the tiny choices that you make day to day that kind of build that bigger picture. And that's where effort becomes less effort than long term. You get that momentum.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so give me examples of what's going on in my mind. Yesterday, I told somebody, I'm like, okay, so you got anxiety. Like, yeah, okay, so what if we just accept that? What if we just say, well, I feel anxious, but I'm going to do it anyway? And you come up with like a thing in your head that says, like, for me, it's always let's go. That's let's go. And it's just like, that inspires me to just like drop everything in my mind and just go.
Yeah.
So like, is that what you mean?
Yeah. I sort of like a coping statement or like an action statement even. Yeah, it's sort of like, for me, like my big thing is I would always go, you've got this. And I'd say it like that to myself, like, you've got this, like, it's like that's you've got to deliver that message to yourself, and it's not going to be the same if you have somebody else saying it to you, or it's got to be that you're just like, look, if I want to develop a mindset that I am somebody who can cope with difficult things, then I actually have to do those difficult things, but I've got to allow myself to believe I can do them, and I've got to develop that. And we know, like neurogenesis, we know people can develop new neural pathways and think completely relate differently to thoughts and patterns of behavior. So there's that possibility. It's just, am I willing to do the effort? Put the effort in.
So basically, you're like, once you get the effort, and then the rest will just kind of fall into place.
Yeah, it's the willingness to do the effort, and I think that's the really tough part. Is and I think I've developed that more so with a lot of my OCD clients, because it's a forever thing that you're working on. There's no, if you're looking to like, I want to keep doing exposures and treatment until I'm not OCD anymore. It's like, that's not how it works. You have to actually have that acceptance of, this is a part of who I am now. This is, I'm not my OCD, but this is something I manage now. So every day I might need to take certain steps to keep myself well, just on a macro level, but on those micro levels, like let's go into, my OCD just told me that if I found that child attractive, I'm a pedophile. Okay, I'm going to sit with that thought, and absolutely not reject it. And it can be, you can see how there's such, I think taboo, they call them taboo, but it's like topics or subtypes in OCD, whereas I see them more as just like the sexual subtypes, which are really interesting. And they're the ones where there's so much more shame and guilt and sort of that cycle attached to it.
Of course, yeah, with the cultural expectation only makes that worse.
If I have this thought, it's true.
Right, and then that thought isn't. It's also true. Then it becomes something about me. Like I become something because I have that thought as well. Like, so it's kind of, it's a morphosis of, I become sort of like, if I do something bad, I am bad.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Instead of like, everybody experiences intrusive thoughts, and anybody who says they're not is lying. You know, it's like everybody experiences intrusive thoughts. With those intrusive thoughts, people who don't attach themselves to those thoughts, they don't see it as a threat. They don't see it as truth necessarily. They don't allow themselves to go, does that mean I'm actually ... You know, there's that moment of kind of going, oh, there's my brain like saying something funny to me, and I'm just going to let it go. Now, obviously, with OCD, it's way harder to do that. So you're putting effort in, like, forever, really, to work on that. And I think I think there's definitely a lot out there where, I don't know if it's the same anymore, but there definitely was that concept of, like, you could, like, fix OCD, or you could get rid of it, or, like, I mean, there's still a lot of stuff out there that says get rid of. And I'm sort of like, that's just, I think there's that message of you're then a failure if you still have OCD, instead of this is something that I'm continuously managing, you know, in myself.
You hear that from your clients all the time. I've been doing this for 2 years, Ken. How come I'm still here, Ken? It's like, well, here's the thing. You're not really. Remember at the beginning, the first time you came to me and I said, if I get rid of 50% of your anxiety, would you be okay? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, well, here it is. Here we are. Like, it's just like, you're not probably going to get rid of 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, that's something where if you're okay with sitting there and going, this is something that, because I'm somebody who wants to build a valuable life for myself, I'm worthy of putting the effort in to manage this disorder, this thought, this feeling, whatever it is.
Good. What if you're not? So I want to get to Kayla's. So it's like, what can you do about the vicious cycle of anxiety, perfection, and procrastination? I want to ask these questions, but the thing that you said that a couple of times, you're like, I want to be worthy. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I do a lot of counseling with people who don't feel worthy. Yeah. It's like, what if you're not? What if you're not? What if you just don't intrinsically think you're worthy even enough to do that?
I think realistically, you'd probably have to work on a lot of, I think, other things before you go straight for then the exposures and things. Like, you wouldn't be really doing that necessarily straight off the bat. You probably would look at behavioral changes, but you'd really look at what exactly is it that's maintaining that cycle. What is the thought? That's maybe we get more into the thoughts especially, but what are those like deep-seated core beliefs? You know, where did they come from? Where did you hear it first? You know, I was bullied when I first moved to Australia, so for me it was that, you know, that a lot of that sort of stuff attached to it. I moved from Ireland to Australia, so I lost my accent. My mum says it got bullied out of me. Like, you know, it's something, you know, it was something where, so in my mind, you know, okay, to be liked, I want to be liked, I want to be accepted, so I'll make sure and try and be a people pleaser and do whatever needs to be done to get that.
Which is easy for anxious people. We're good at that, right? So completely. That's right up your alley. Yeah. That was perfect. You're like, okay,
exactly. So to be able to then go, okay, I now have to try and challenge all of the behaviors that seemed safe to me and kept me safe, really. I sort of talk about it like, you've got to start recognizing expired thoughts and expired behaviors, things that maybe made sense at one point, but they don't anymore. And that in order for you to actually start to, I think, move out of that narrative that I was talking about that you kind of write for yourself, a big part of it is that sort of, I guess, even just being willing to talk about it, to sit with it, to validate it yourself, you know, not look for it to be validated anywhere else, but for you to be like, hold on, like, these are these thoughts that I have, and that's really hard to sit with on a daily basis. And actually, I'm kind of doing things to reinforce them. You know, I'm not having a shower, I'm not, you know, doing that thing. I have delayed doing my assignment, and in some way that's where, especially if there's perfectionism coming in, it allows you to get into that cycle of, I will actually somewhat delay doing it until the last minute, so that if I do it at the last minute and I don't get a successful outcome, let's say for an assignment, I can somewhat go, oh, well, if I had had more time, if I had have actually worked at it, maybe I would have gotten the outcome that I expected. Or see, I'm a piece of crap. That's, you know, of course I was going to get such a bad result.
Like a self-fulfilling
Oh, completely. It's a lot of, I think a lot of perfectionism is really self-sabotaging. I mean, you're trying to strive for something completely unattainable. You know, you never ever will be perfect. That you never get that. And even if you got to like whatever you wanted, the bar would move. Like it'd be like, hey, now we're over here.
Yeah, because I don't think it's about your hair, your face, or your body, or your weight, or whatever. It's about that thing that you're trying to hide. Yeah. Like behind all of that, it's just like, well, what's your body hiding? Because that's kind of the thing you're afraid of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's again that you've also placed far more value on something than probably what's healthy to place on that, right? That's that moment of how am I behaving in ways that support the belief that my self-worth is attached to an outcome, is attached to a mark, a result, or a medal.
Okay, let's talk about like how do I not, so my self-worth has to be detached from an outcome. That's difficult.
That's difficult.
Because people like to put like, they're unable to validate themselves. They've never had anybody validate them. And, you know, doing things and then getting that validation or that thing back from society or whoever, that's letting me know that I'm doing a pretty good job. How do you detach it from your own?
So
like, what would you?
I would say embracing that the concept of unconditional self-acceptance is probably the way to go. So self-esteem, I think, is attached a lot to the judgment side of things. And I know like Albert Ellis, REBT, he loved all of this stuff, so he was kind of a big one for this, but that concept of I'm a valuable person just in being a person and in having like, I think, positive behaviors or positive morals, or like in general, I'm somebody who's worthy even if I don't get that promotion, even if that other person doesn't love me, even if, you know, anything, even if I don't do the job my parents want me to do. You know, there's a lot of things that are attached to allowing yourself to experience, I think, the uncomfortability of having to sit with that at first, but allowing yourself to then not follow through with doing those people-pleasing behaviors or compulsions or whatever else it is that kind of will reinforce that message that you are only worthy if this is the outcome that you achieve. So either way, you'll love, like, you know, I guess when you look at it, even in like sports psychology, like someone goes out on a field, there's two teams, someone has to lose. That doesn't mean those people, all of the people on both teams put in all the effort they could have. They've worked really hard. They've allowed themselves to be everything that they needed to be. But there's that moment of, I don't have control now. Like this is, whatever the outcome is not, it's not, you know, it's not really up to me. I just get to, I guess, engage in the process as best I can. Be as mindful in the moment.
It's still worth playing.
It's absolutely still, yeah, exactly. It's still worth playing the game. And also, what's the alternative? To feel miserable the rest of my life? Like, I'm going to feel miserable anyway, so why not, if I'm going to feel uncomfortable, you know, do the uncomfortable stuff that's required to feel better.
Totally. Very strong, very rational.
Yeah.
You could see some people might have trouble with that.
Totally,
like they would be like, they'd be like, oh, hang on a minute, that's very rational. Thank you very much. Very kind of strong, and it would almost be a little threatening. How do you go about that kind of? You just got to soften it up, go slowly.
Yeah, so
to meet them at the
it's definitely meeting them where they are. So I think for some of that, it can be like, what would somebody who believes they're worthy do for themselves? So that really would be like, I would maybe just start doing yoga. I would, you know, allow myself to eat, you know, maybe a healthy meal and let myself have something that's not great all the time, you know, and not condemn myself. I'd make more connections with people. Like you would do the basic self-care stuff, but look at trying to have that be consistent, because I think the problem is more so that people can do that, but they all or nothing that. So they'll be like, self-care day, and then, you know, or I did some meditation. It's like, have you done that every day? Have you done, you know, just a minute a day of meditation? Have you read for like 5 minutes? You know, did you, you know, allow yourself to go for a quick walk? But it's always such an excessive outcome that you want. You want to picture yourself being like, you know, these people on, you know, YouTube and, you know, all those people going like, this is what I do for my life. And you're like, that's so intimidating. But it really is in the day-to-day stuff. It's that consistency of like tiny little steps. And definitely a big part of that, I think, is that self-compassion and mindfulness, I think, does develop, is quite positive for self-compassion specifically.
Yeah, totally. I can hear, 1% better. We had a guy on there, Mr. Self-Love, and she's like 1% better.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lex is saying, hey, I find struggle to detach with relationships and my worth relies on, which is more of a codependency.
Yeah, boundaries, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so what do you, and you know that that's so intertwined with anxiety, because when you try to pull a person away from that, they get very anxious because they don't really know who they are. Their identities kind of are based on that person. There's so many things that involve a person. How do you speak to that?
I talk a lot about grief with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of, like, it's acceptable to feel that way. You know, sometimes I'll have clients show up after a breakup, you know, a day later, and I'll be like, what are you doing here? Go home and, like, cry and be sad, like, eat some ice cream, watch TV, like, that's, like, it's okay, like, be human, like, you coming and be like, right, how do I fix my, like, you have to feel it. You avoiding the feeling is what's causing you to feel like you need to be something other than what you are in this moment, because what's happening right now is acceptable. And actually, that was the primary attachment, I think, in that way is I can't really cope without this person. And in some way, well, that's because it's going to require a lot of adjusting and a lot of change and uncertainty, which we don't like change or uncertainty when we're anxious. So, you know, we really resist that.
So what about in the relationship?
Yeah, in the relationship.
Like, I'm in the relationship, I got a boyfriend, and the more connected I am, the more anxious I'm getting. Like, I'm getting more anxious as I'm with him.
Yeah.
You know, I do people-pleasing things. I'm not really valuing myself in this. Like, it's kind of him first, you know, more about, like, making sure he's happy, those kind of
I mean, I guess the issue with that is then it goes into, like, more of an insecure attachment. So, you know, likely that whole anxious avoidant attachment that can happen. So with that, it's that I guess you lose a sense of who you are as a person in a relationship, and a lot of how you feel is dictated by how the other person is feeling. And again, that's how you then build that whole, as long as they're happy, I'm happy. I've made them happy, now, you know, I'm a worthy person. And I mean, look, I think some people exist in lives like that, and I think that could, I think it's pretty miserable to do that, but I think the main goal would be to try and maybe set just small boundaries around what's appropriate and what's acceptable for you. You know, that boundary of I'm setting this boundary because I want to like myself. Yeah, I want to be somebody who believes that, you know, I can hold my own, and, you know, you're an individual and I'm an individual, and at our best selves we can be a great duo, but we have to allow ourselves to be individuals as well. And so, you know, a boundary could be as simple as, you know, if we start to argue and you call me a name, I'm going to stop the argument and leave the room. You know, I'm not going to be okay with you calling me names. And they're not going to just change that. They're going to be like, sure, honey. And then that's going to happen. There's a pattern that might be in place by then that you're asking them to change. So it requires that kind of work together, that effort. And I guess, and you hope the other person comes to the table to do that with you. But as that's happening, you have to follow through on whatever the boundary is. So the only way to allow yourself to build a sense of what I think is like confidence, you know, feeling of
and self.
But confidence, like I like myself. I just did something for me. I'm a more confident person for that. Is to actually follow through with what you say you're going to do. So you know, that's that moment of whenever parents are like,
there's the risk.
Yeah,
Tonya, that's the risk, right? Why don't we do that? Like, why don't we put in boundaries? Because I'm afraid I'm going to lose the relationship. Like, boundaries for a lot of people equals loss. It equals
absolutely,
a wall.
yeah. And then with that loss comes a lot of learning as well. And with that allows you to, in some way, leave a situation. That's that whole meet that person where they are, but leave them, you know, where they are at times. Like, you have to leave them there sometimes, in that if that person isn't able to do that with you, they're not in a place to have a secure attachment. They're not wanting to work on that with you. So you can't force that. They can't do that for you. They can't change for you, I guess, is a good way of thinking about it. So if they're not able to meet your needs, and your needs is to just be respected in that moment, like, again, that's a very small, minute example, but if there's certain things that are required for you to allow for your boundaries to exist, and they're not able to accommodate that, that's where you have to go, well, okay, so we obviously don't match. And that's the fear, is that, you know, we meet somebody and that one person out of 7.5 billion is the only possible person that I could ever be with, or that
just you, just that one person.
Just that one person. And it's unromantic. I know it sounds really unromantic to say.
And he's on Tinder too.
Exactly. It's like, but he's there, and it's like,
you guys have Tinder?
We do have Tinder,
Have Tinder? Oh,
We do. It has blown up apparently during COVID, which makes me laugh.
Right. Yeah, we got a lot of Tinder here too. Okay. All right. So what does unconditional, thank you, by the way, for answering those questions. My little Alexis is like, hey, what if they leave me? And I know that's a big thing, is like just the fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of not mattering, not feeling important. And I guess that's just my importance is in that relationship. So that's where I'm getting it from.
But it's also that it's I think it's self-respect too. Like if I don't respect myself, they can't respect me. You know, if I'm not willing to, like, I always sort of say to people, and this probably, I do allow for there to be more of like I know this myself. People who really like you, if you do everything, you make sure everybody likes you, they may like you, but they're not going to really respect you. You know, that's that moment of you don't have any sense of how, of telling that person how they should treat you or how you believe you deserve to be treated. So why would they're just following along with what you're allowing. You know, I think I had a really good moment with a client once where she was like, just in a up and down relationship. And it was really interesting because she was like, I've realized that he's not even making me miserable anymore. I'm making me miserable. Like, she's like, I'm staying. He's going, this is what I'm willing to offer. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe you're not. And maybe you could change that. And he's like, no. And there's that continuous combative thing of me feeling like crap and unworthy and all of this stuff, but I'm choosing it every day. I'm waking up and choosing this person every day. And so I'm kind of choosing this feeling instead of like, he's a narcissist, he's a horrible human being, you know, like instead of that projection, it's going, what are you doing to maintain this as well?
Nice. You're the second. Okay, we're going back to Mr. Self-Love because he said that too. He like one of the first, his story kind of said, I had this moment when I realized, you're not doing this to me. I'm doing this to me.
Yeah.
And it was just like this accountability. How big is accountability in healing? How big is accountability?
Yeah.
You know, Alexa said thank you. So you're really helping her, you're really talking to her. So like, how big is that in terms of like succeeding to get to this style of getting past your anxiety?
I feel like accountability, and I guess sometimes it's like the whole taking responsibility, like that is really something I think is probably essential, because otherwise we stay in a really victim mindset for a lot of things. You know, I think we can become really into that cycle of, why is this happening to me? This shouldn't happen to me. And I often say to people, that's where you're sort of struggling on top of the struggle. That's where you're adding a struggle on top of what's already going on, which is a struggle. And that's where it then moves into that suffering, and that suffering causes the depression and all of these other things. And now we're dealing with this, and we're not able to focus on, well, wait a minute, what are the steps? Like, what could we do about what's going on? You know, so it's kind of, I think, huge to move past just the thought process around recovery. I think it's really important in like the behavioral aspect.
I feel like you're like, okay, what can we do? What can we do? So much of this would be terrifying for people to say, well, I'm alone. Like, I would have to do this alone. Like, because that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
I already have social anxiety, so I already feel disconnected. I already feel like this and this. But now I'd be alone, and there'd be this risk risk of that, right?
I almost feel like, what is the risk?
What's that?
What is the risk, I think, is really interesting. Like, what is it that you fear about being alone? You know, and that's really an interesting area to then target, is like, well, then I might have to figure out what I like, or, you know, that maybe I have to validate myself and I don't have someone telling me I look pretty. You know, there's lots of different things that I think you can, like, unearth by allowing yourself to, again, be alone at times if that's what's required.
Yeah. Okay. So it forces you to take some responsibility or some ownership for your own life.
Yeah.
Basically.
Like,
kind
what
of puts it back on you, because the default is somebody else, I guess, right?
Like, what expectations? What expectations and demands have I got kind of sitting around that are getting in my way a lot of the time?
Totally. Well, like, there's this concept in my mind before. Let's go back a little bit, where you said, just kind of do it. And I was thinking, fake it till you make it. It's kind of idea. Like, I'm just going to go do this. And I'm just like, what about the people that feel like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to do it. But the whole time I'm doing it, I feel gross. I feel like I'm not even Like I feel like I'm betraying my own self.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So I guess how I like to think of it is the whole like face it till you make it. So I really like that one. Instead of the fake it till you make it, it's like face it till you make it. And I guess you're not actually you're not betraying you. You're betraying the anxiety. You're betraying the fear or the doubt or whatever the narrative is. That's what you're actually feeling uncomfortable. That's what's feeling uncomfortable, is that you're challenging that.
That is so interesting. Yeah. That resonates with me. So you're saying, no, you're not betraying yourself. You're betraying this thing, this feeling. That's like, almost like a personification. Like this thing's a third thing sitting here, or this thing's beside me, and I'm kind of betraying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, cool. Thank you so far. Thank you so much for all. Guys, you can ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Okay, what would you say, what would you say to these people that are all watching and talking about anxiety stuff? Do you have, overarching concepts, overarching themes that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah.
What kind of things would you tell somebody to encourage?
So I wrote down I thought of the 5 things, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't make it 5 things. So I ended up making
that's okay.
I made it 5 micro stuff on the day-to-day, and then 5 macro, concepts to try and think about, to try and see if that would make it a little bit better. A lot of them I've probably already spoken about, but on the kind of micro level of day-to-day with managing, I think just feelings in general, but anxiety specifically, is definitely allowing yourself to manage yourself physiologically. So, catch that fight or flight response. And again, if it's not panic or if it's not something that you're meant to be doing, that you have set up exposure around or anything, allow yourself to ground. So definitely those things like the 5 senses, mindfulness apps, splash the water on the face. All of my teens and adults would know that's my favorite one, is have a cold shower, do the stuff that's will shift you.
Sure.
Write down thoughts. So start to move into an observer role with thoughts instead of that judger sort of role. So I like the cognitive diffusion stuff of I'm aware that I'm having the thought, ... I'm aware that I'm having the feeling, ... And I've used it in examples of people, even let's say it's just body image. This person's looking in the mirror and their brain goes, you look like a piece of shit. That's really different to I'm aware I'm having the thought that I look like a piece of shit. That is such a different relationship to that same thought, where you're allowing it to be. Thoughts are just thoughts that have a bunch of words and they've developed a sentence, and my brain went, wait, what's that? When it popped up into my head. That's what's happening in that moment. And the value I put on them is what's going to kind of let them build that, feeding the thought.
So that's the second one, where you write down the thoughts and you're kind of almost disconnecting from it. You're devaluing the thought. Yeah,
exactly. You're sort of allowing there to be that, especially within OCD, that kind of thought fusion. You're just defusing with that.
Awesome.
So that was definitely one. Obviously the separate motivation from action. So try to do this is what I'm choosing for myself. This is what I want, and recognize that this is what I want, but this is what I'm going to choose in this moment, and make it tiny. I often say to people, especially if it's procrastination, you're just starting with open my laptop, I love, Tiny Habit stuff. BJ Fogg does all that stuff, really looking at that, attach the tiniest goal you could set to, and then be really praise yourself about it. It's uncomfortable. It may be a little weird and icky at first, but that whole I'm awesome. I just did that. That's great. Why shouldn't I be really excited about that? Because again, that behavior change is attached to emotion. We're going to avoid that emotion of I don't like this. This is uncomfortable. We will attach the behavior of avoidance. If we're praising ourselves for doing really tough things, we're going to be more likely to allow ourselves to move forward with it. So definitely that. I love that one. And I guess, I would definitely, the big one that I think I use on a day-to-day with clients is to kind of give that concept is respond versus react. So that can sometimes help too, is kind of stopping and being okay, my reaction is all the stuff I'm used to. But in this moment, let's just take that pause. What's the response that is attached to my bigger value system that I want to do right now? And actually, I use that one a lot with clients when it comes to the whole attachment with relationships. So that's the whole, in the moment, he hasn't texted me back and I want to send the 40th message to say, you should have, where are you? What are you doing? And you just don't send that message. That's that moment of someone who would like themselves is not going to send that message.
So someone that likes themselves would not send that message.
Yeah, someone who's like, I'm a valuable person. I'm not sending a hey, where are you for the 50th time.
Okay, that sounds like I know already. There's a few people there that are going to be like, hey, that's hard. Like, you know, like, well, I don't like myself, so here we go.
I know, well, exactly.
Anyway. Right. You said praise self for doing the tough things. I actually find in my practice that that's hard. Like I will be like, hey, can we just celebrate for a minute that you just did a really hard thing? Can we just like give ourselves permission to be okay? Like just like you just did something here. That was great. And like, because sometimes they'll come in and they'll be like, I did this. Like our girl's like, wow, I went to the gym and I went to this restaurant I've never been to. I'm like, what? I'm like, that's fantastic. High five. And they're just like, she's like downplaying it like nobody's business.
Yeah.
So what would be wrong? What would be wrong if you celebrated that? Like, what would happen if you did that?
That's great. I like that.
But she just doesn't want to.
Yeah.
You know, like she doesn't want to. How do you go about that?
I think a big part of that is that it's you see that a lot more. I think with like perfectionism as well. I feel like that's something where it's like, well, that's tiny. Like that's not even valuable. Like other humans do that. So why should I be like, that's great? So it's actually deliberately homework, and any clients who are watching this right now are going, because I do make them do this, where they have to kind of pick a trait a week that they think of, like it could be like valuable, or it could be like determined, for example. And you pick that thing, and you have to notice when, you know, you have to think of times when you've done that, or you have to notice, you know, when was I valuable, like when was I determined, when was I a good friend, like just stuff that it's going to feel really icky. And I'm like, trust me, I know, like that, doing any of this stuff for me, it felt really weird to do. But that's that moment of, you know, well, actually, I'm willingly kind of engaging in behaviors that stop myself from feeling like a valuable person. So, why can't I just embrace the other side for a second? You know, and then I go back to thinking the way I think about myself, like whatever, just anything to get that moment of, you know, that developed. It took time to develop that. I don't want to say self-loathing or self-hatred, but somewhat the concept around that I'm not worthy unless. It took time to develop that. It will take even longer now to unravel that, I guess.
I'm sitting here thinking like, holy cow, thank you, Tonia, because you're validating me a little bit, because I'm just like, I'm doing this on the daily, right? So like, I'm so glad to be like, okay, good, Tonia's doing the same. Like she's doing the same thing I'm doing, because like, even this week I was just like, well, just pick one thing that you can say that you like about yourself, and then next week we'll just pick another one. Now there's two things you can like about yourself, and I'm getting eye rolls, and I'm getting kind of like, no, so you don't like, they don't really want to do it, right? The other 5 things that you were saying, you have the micro and then you have the macro.
Yes. So the others on the micro was the coping statements. So the whole, I've got this, you've got this, I can do hard things. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's not dangerous. Stuff like that, to allow yourself to kind of, especially if you're doing exposures, or just going into uncomfortable moments, you know, going to a party and you just start to feel slightly nervous, just stuff like that. And then, excuse me, not avoiding immediately. So letting yourself sort of stick out a situation or delay leaving the situation as much as possible. I've heard it be called procrastinate on procrastination. Like sort of not sort of allow yourself to avoid, or not let yourself fall into the pattern that's easier to do in that moment, because that's what we've always done. But just take that moment of pause and sort of not go, I'll last 5 more minutes.
Delay the runaway.
That's a good way. I like that of thinking of it.
Okay, I'm going to lose you here in about 45 seconds, so I'm going to probably just shut it down and we'll start it again in 2 seconds. Is that okay? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.